I was standing by the kitchen island at 4:30 in the morning, holding a cold cup of coffee, listening to the absolute silence of my own house. Alyssa was still upstairs, deeply asleep. And I remember staring out the window into the dark Scottsdale morning, realizing with a heavy, sickening knot in my stomach that I was actively hoping she wouldn't wake up while I was still in the house. I was leaving early for a flight, and I wanted to be gone before she stirred. Not because we had fought, not because I was angry. It was because I was terrified of that quiet, predictable moment of physical expectation. I was 56 years old, and for the better part of a year, my body had simply stopped responding in the bedroom. The wiring felt completely dead. And instead of having a brutally honest conversation about it, I was doing what most men do. I was retreating, working longer hours, and actively avoiding the woman I loved, so I wouldn't have to face the humiliation of failing her yet again. That morning by the kitchen island was the absolute lowest point of my marriage, and it had absolutely nothing to do with how I felt about my wife. It had everything to do with a quiet, mechanical failure inside my own body that I was entirely too proud to acknowledge, let alone fix. If you are watching this right now and you are quietly dealing with the loss of your own sexual vitality, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I know the exact, unspoken shame you are carrying, and I know how many men our age are silently convinced that their intimate life is permanently behind them. I am going to break down exactly what I figured out when I finally stopped feeling sorry for myself. And I promise you, the reality of what is happening to you is not what you think. Back then, I justified my physical decline with every excuse in the corporate playbook. I told myself it was the chronic stress of running regional sales teams. I blamed the relentless travel schedules, the bad hotel food, the fact that I was simply getting older. I assumed my physical desire was just naturally winding down, like an old contract running out of terms. But the truth was infinitely more mechanical, and ignoring it was destroying my life. The male sexual response is not just an emotional switch you can flip whenever the mood strikes. It is a highly demanding, simultaneous sequence of electrical signaling and hydraulic pressure. You need the brain to send a clear, powerful spark down the line, and you need the microvascular system, the absolute smallest, thinnest fuel lines in your body, to instantly dilate and flood the region with blood. What I did not realize was that 3 decades of operating on high stress and poor physical maintenance had effectively corroded those tiny lines. I wasn't falling out of love with Alyssa. I was experiencing a catastrophic failure of peripheral blood flow and hormonal communication. I watched a guy I mentored years ago in Chicago blow up his 20-year marriage because he and his wife supposedly drifted apart. I looked at him during a conference and knew the absolute truth. The physical connection died first because his hardware failed. The emotional distance filled in the gap, and the resentment burned the house down. He never bothered to fix the engine. He just let the car rust in the driveway and blamed the weather. The first concrete thing I had to change was how I managed the baseline fuel for my entire system. Like a lot of men, I wore my stress like a badge of honor. But when your body is constantly flooded with cortisol from work anxiety, lack of sleep, and constant screen time, it actively shuts down testosterone production. It is a biological survival mechanism. Your body thinks you are in a war zone, and it cuts the power to the reproductive system to keep the vital organs running. It is exactly like trying to run a heavy-duty generator on the red line 24 hours a day. Eventually, the starter motor burns out completely. I had to institute a hard, non-negotiable cutoff for my professional life. No emails after 7. No staring at a bright screen in bed. I had to physically signal to my nervous system that the workday was over so my body could safely shift resources back to producing the hormones that actually make a man feel like a man. When the chronic stress backed off, the quiet, subtle signals of physical desire slowly started to turn back on. The second change was addressing the actual microplumbing. We spend so much time worrying about our main arteries that we completely ignore the microscopic vessels that actually dictate sexual function. When you sit at a desk for decades, those tiny vessels lose their elasticity. They stiffen up, and when the brain sends the signal to dilate, they simply refuse to open. You cannot push fuel through a collapsed hose. I started changing how I moved. I stopped just doing slow, plodding walks around the neighborhood and started integrating short, heavy bursts of physical exertion. Pushing my heart rate up hard for 60 seconds, then letting it recover. That sudden demand for oxygen forces the body to create nitric oxide, which acts like a chemical crowbar, forcing those tiny, stiffened vessels to expand and regain their flexibility. The difference in my physical response within a month of focusing on microcirculation was undeniable. The hardware started to wake up because the fuel could finally reach the destination. If this mechanical approach makes sense to you, or if you have ever felt that terrible distance growing between you and your partner because your body stopped cooperating, hit the like button right now. It helps put this exact conversation in front of other men who are sitting in silence, thinking their best days are already gone. We have to be honest about the things that actually work. The third shift was entirely mental, and it required admitting how much damage my own ego was doing. When a man fails in the bedroom once or twice, the brain registers it as a massive trauma. The next time you are in that situation, instead of being present with your partner, your brain is frantically monitoring the dashboard, terrified of another failure. That panic dumps adrenaline into your system, which instantly kills the physical response you are trying to achieve. It is a brutal, self-fulfilling prophecy. You cannot force an engine to start by screaming at it. I had to sit down with Alyssa and have the single most uncomfortable conversation of my life. I laid the shame out on the table. We took the pressure of the end goal completely off the table for a while. We focused strictly on physical proximity and rebuilding trust in my own hardware without the looming threat of a performance review. Taking the pressure out of the system is what ultimately allowed the system to function naturally again. Getting the stress, the circulation, and the communication right built the foundation. But I am a pragmatist. After 50, the internal communication between your brain and your hormones gets sluggish, and those tiny blood vessels need serious maintenance. I realized I needed internal support, but I absolutely refused to become dependent on a synthetic blue pill that forces a mechanical reaction while ignoring the underlying health of the system. I went looking for something real. I found a natural support protocol that I now use every single day. It relies on maca, which does not force artificial hormone production, but rather regulates the signal the brain sends to the hormonal organs. It simply adjusts and clears the communication line. The protocol also includes alpha-lipoic acid, an antioxidant that specifically targets and protects those tiny, fragile blood vessels, making sure the pathways stay clear so the flow can actually arrive when the signal is sent. I never tell another man what to do with his health, but if you want to see the exact formulation I rely on to keep the engine running smoothly, I put a link in the pinned comment right below this video. You can also scan the QR code you see on the screen right now. I read a lot of conflicting garbage before I found a clean mechanism that I actually trust. Because here's the reality that nobody wants to talk about. This is never just about sex. It is about how you carry yourself in the world. When your physical vitality collapses, it bleeds into everything else. Your confidence in a boardroom shrinks. Your patience with your kids evaporates. You start walking a little slower, talking a little quieter, and accepting a smaller, safer version of your life. We pretend that losing our sexual drive is just a funny punchline about getting old. It is not. It is the canary in the coal mine for your overall masculine presence. When I fixed the hardware and got that connection back with Alyssa, I didn't just get my marriage back. I got my edge back in every single room I walked into. Many men are not permanently broken. They are just ignoring the wrong things and hoping the problem fixes itself. You do not have to accept a sexless, disconnected life just because there is gray in your beard. You still own the machine. You just have to be willing to open the hood and do the required maintenance. Tell me in the comments. Did anyone ever explain this mechanical connection to you, or did you just assume your prime was over and you had to live with it? I read every single one, and I know how isolating it is to think you are the only guy dealing with a dead engine. Do not spend another year pulling away from your partner because you are too proud to fix the mechanics. The longer you let poor circulation and chronic stress dictate your physical response, the harder it is to wake the system back up. Start managing your stress and forcing that microcirculation tomorrow. And if you want to give your body the exact internal support it needs to keep those tiny pathways open and the signals firing, look at the protocol I use. The link is waiting for you in the pinned comment below, and the QR code is still right there on your screen. Look at the ingredients yourself. See if the logic makes sense for the frustration you are dealing with right now. I am Cole Harrison. Keep doing the work.